A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.'" From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. I have always been a big fan of space, of the universe, and knowing what it is that's out there. This whole last week, I've been really kind of obsessed with the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, a new scientific instrument heading out far beyond the moon that will eventually show us images of what the universe looked like just a few million years after it had formed, looking out further and further back in time than we've ever seen in the history of humanity. It's an exciting thing. It's an exciting time to be kind of a space nerd. And it's always been something that's been a part of me. I've always been fascinated by exploration and by space and by the limits of what's out there and what we can know. And I remember very specifically, one time I was probably about 12 years old. My dad fished out an old VHS tape from kind of that drawer of VHS tapes everybody seemed to have around that time. And he pulled it out and said, "I want you to watch this. And it's not really a movie, but you should just watch it." And I pulled out this tape, and it was called Powers of 10. I put it in, and what I found was basically a very simple experiment that was continued on for a number of minutes in video form. The idea behind it was that you would start with a simple image, 1 meter by 1 meter, a scene of a picnic in, a park outside of Chicago. And every 10 seconds, the camera would pull back so that in 10 seconds, you would see a scene that was 10 meters wide. And 10 seconds after that, you would see a scene that was 100 meters wide. And I watched, just kind of perplexed at what was going on the screen. And I saw the camera pulling back, and the scene got wider and wider. And after a few of these, 10-second increments, you could see now the whole city of Chicago. And in 10 more seconds, you could see most of Lake Michigan. Another 10 seconds, most of North America is visible on the screen. And before long, the whole Earth, and then the Earth and the moon, and you're seeing the orbits of neighboring planets. The sun comes into view. Every 10 seconds, the scene gets 10 times larger, and it keeps going and going and going. And it's zooming out, and eventually the whole solar system comes into view, the scale of it. And it keeps zooming out, and stars start to move. We start to come outside of the Milky Way galaxy, seeing these masses of hot dust flowing by. And every time I think I'm watching this, that I can't possibly comprehend anymore, another 10 seconds goes by and things zoom out even further. By the end of this tape, whole galaxies are streaming by like little flashes of light. And it zooms all the way to the end. And this narrator, who I then learned was Carl Sagan, says, "This is what we know of the universe. This is the limits of our knowledge. All that we have ever seen or observed or postulated is within this universe." And it brings you back in. Every 10 seconds, zooming back all the way down to that single 1 meter square. And after watching this video, I just felt my mind kind of breaking again and again as I tried to comprehend the vast distances between scale of galaxies on the order of the universe down to one single person laying in a park outside of Chicago. It was just a crazy experience trying to, and failing to again and again, comprehend the scale and the size of this vast place that we live in. There was something about that really stuck with me, and I think it's the same kind of feeling I often get when I try to think about God and who God is. That God is so far beyond what we can comprehend that even trying to dive into that question just kind of makes your head hurt. Whenever I have young kids, my own kids or other kids, maybe at Grace Place, they might ask me a question about God of, where does God live or how big God is? The answer I always try and come back to is very simple. It's just bigger. Whatever you think God might be, bigger than that. Keep going. There's always another level. There's always something more. God is beyond whatever we can imagine. God is simply bigger. And this is a kind of powerful thing. And I think it's what the writer of John's gospel is trying to get at. We have this opening to this grand story, and John just puts it on this amazing stage that would fit right alongside some of that narration by Carl Sagan about our universe. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. How much bigger could you be than that? John is trying to encapsulate this thing that cannot be encapsulated. John is trying to put together this sense of awe and wonder that comes on a scale we can't really fathom. This one that we know as God, who is beyond whatever we could comprehend. John opens this up, and it's a really beautiful thing. It's amazing poetry. It's probably some of my favorite poetry in the whole Bible. This bit about in the beginning. But then John keeps going. You see, this whole piece so far, it's a beautiful thing, and there are many, many groups of people who would be totally fine with everything that John says. Christians, Jews, Muslims, even a lot of agnostics. We all understand and we feel instinctively that God is beyond what we can understand, that God is beyond us, that God exists and works out on this kind of cosmic level of just indescribable everythingness. But you see, then John says something else, something that is going to put all of these other groups kind of off the train. John says, and then the Word. And then this unknowable, amazing, infinite God became flesh and dwelt among us. And that's a surprise. That's a surprise because if you have the infinite, if you have something beyond total comprehension, the only thing that God could not do would be to become small, would be to become knowable, to become vulnerable. And yet, this is exactly where God goes in this story. This story of Christmas is about this unknowable, this universal, amazing God that we can barely comprehend, coming to us as a person, That all of God somehow found its way into the person of Jesus, who came into the world and who lived and who suffered and who made friends and who lost friends and who had bad hair days and who was hungry and who died. That is a radical thing to say. And this is exactly where John is going in this story of the Gospels. That God shows up in the most unexpected places. That God could actually come to us in a way that we can see and know and touch and feel. It's a radical thing to believe that. And we Christians are pretty much alone in that belief. We are, I think, one of the only religions that really feels that God came as a person and the whole of God was there in that person of Jesus. It's not an easy thing to wrap our minds around, let alone to wrap your mind around an infinite God, whatever that means. But that the God who created all, who is beyond whatever we can imagine, could show up in a person and walk with us. That is quite a statement to make. But this is the story of Christmas. This is the story of the miracle of God coming to us. We are not left as people who have to wonder where God is among the cosmos. We have a God who comes to us, who shows up right in the midst of our lives, who comes and walks alongside us. Jesus is God with us. Jesus is God living life the way we live life. The one who knows what it means to lose a friend, who knows what it means to be in a bad mood, to be hungry, to struggle in school, to do all of the things that we do. Jesus is God with us right here and right now. Now, if you read through the rest of John's Gospels, you probably won't find a moment where Jesus has to live through a global pandemic or go to synagogue online. We have some unique situations going on right now. But the story of Jesus, again and again, is the story of God going to places that are unexpected, going to places that nobody thought God could be. The story of Jesus is about God coming to us wherever we are, especially when we don't think God could be there. This is a story that tells us that God is here with us right now, that God is walking alongside us through the midst of this pandemic, that God has gone here before. You might not find that chapter in John's Gospel where Jesus had to quarantine for 10 days. But we do know that Jesus found himself to be lonely at times, that Jesus suffered in so many different ways, that Jesus mourned the loss of a friend. Jesus has walked this path before. God has walked this path of life before. And God is with us right here and right now. Even as we can't even gather in person for worship, even as we try and find ways to reach out to one another in these very strange times, coming up almost on year 2 of a global pandemic. We don't know what's coming next. But one thing we can be sure of is that God is still with us, that God is still showing up, that God is still coming into this world. That God is not content to be on the edges of the universe as some unknowable force, but that God comes to us and is in our lives. That God shows up in family and friends, in strangers and in people we never expect. That God can even show up in us, in our hands and in our feet, in the actions and in the ways we reach out to those around us. God comes to us. As Jesus, God comes to us again and again in our world, right here and right now. This is the miracle of Christmas. This is the miracle of a God who is beyond all that we can imagine, and yet comes right in front of us, picks us up, holds us close, and sends us out to share that love with the world. Wherever you are this day, wherever you find yourself in this moment, whatever you might be going through, please know that God is with you, that God walks alongside you, that God loves you and cares for you, and that God sends all of us out to go and see where God might be coming next. What a miracle to celebrate this day, right here and right now. Amen.